one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Grappler's Dilemma podcast, episode number 8. I'm your host, Aaron, here with Cody, and today's question of the day is going to be brought to you by Aaron Giannetti from Knife Control Concepts. But before we get to that, how was your week, Cody?
Yeah, great. I've been doing a lot of private lessons with kids, which will kind of tie into our subject today. And it's been very fun and a learning experience.
How did you get turned on to doing those?
Well, Chris, our head coach, hooked me up with some parents who are interested. So
right on.
So thanks to him for that. It's turning into kind of a fun side hustle for me.
Right on. Yeah, my week was pretty easy going, although I am getting sick. So if you can hear my voice and it sounds like I'm talking like someone who's not trying to smell something bad, that is the reason why. Thursday, Friday, I attended Knife Control Concepts with Aaron Giannetti and Eli Knight, and that was over at Kindred Jiu-Jitsu in Edmonds. It was awesome. It was all, as the title would suggest, all pertaining to defensive knife. So an attacker comes at you with a knife. Here's the best options you have available when you are unarmed. And it was 2 6-hour days, and majority of it had to do with head positioning and fighting for head position. Hence why my face, if you can see in the video, is totally jacked up from just grinding up against other people's foreheads and shoulders and all this kind of stuff.
This was the first thing I said when I saw Aaron today. I was like,
yeah, like, dude, what happened to your face?
Red and puffy.
But I get that even when I'm just doing regular gi. If I'm doing like a lot of top pressure game, dude, by the next day it'll look like I'm a burn victim or something. But anyway, so while I was there, I want to say Eli and Aaron were great, and I asked them if they'd be willing to do like a 10-second video clip for the podcast, so they could ask our question of the day. And so first we're gonna do Aaron Giannetti's question of the day. What's going up, guys? Well, maybe just restart, dude. Hold on. What's going on, guys? It's Aaron with the Grappler's Dilemma, and today we just finished up at Kindred Jiu-Jitsu with KCC1, Knife Control Concepts, and I'm here with the man himself, Aaron Giannetti, who's going to be asking our question of the day. Actually, 2 questions of the day. So,
double dose.
Yeah, double dose. Aaron squared and double dose questions.
First question, crazy but weird.
Okay.
Which Teletubby would you prefer to fight, and how would you finish them?
Yeah, we're not going to do the second question, I don't think. Okay, and number two. What do you got?
Number two, most impactful trainer, instructor, person, mentor, anything along the way, whatever that experience was and why it impacted you.
Oh, that's brilliant. Right on, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. So here's the thing about that first question. I didn't recall that the Teletubbies even had names. But Eli Knight with Eli Knight Jiu-Jitsu was like, obviously there's Lala, Poe, Tinky Winky, and then whatever the other one was. And I was like,
I remember
what?
Tinky Winky because there was a controversy back in the day over whether he was secretly gay.
Yeah, a guy named Tinky Winky. Anyway, I think I would definitely pick Tinky Winky as far as easy, dude.
Crime.
Yeah. No, but that's just an easy bet, dude. But the other side of me was like, man, if you grow up with a name like Tinky Winky, you're probably used to fighting. And so I wondered if that was actually not a good choice. And then as far as like how to finish them, I don't think rear naked chokes are like really in because their head is the size of a freaking beach ball. Mm-hmm. I don't really know what you would. They have giant eyes, so I think that like some type of eye gouge would be part of that.
Brutal.
And I also wonder how sensitive like the little thing on the top of their head is. If you could just grab that, snap it off, if that would be the thing
or
to
just do a submission.
Some type of like a wrist lock on it. Or something like that. But yeah, I just the funniest part of that question was literally Eli being like, dude, obviously they have names, and then listing them all off. It was because Eli's a very soft-spoken
maybe his kids
dude.
Watched it.
Yeah, that would make sense. Or he's like secretly like a huge fan, like a brony kind of a thing.
I've never watched Teletubbies. I'm not really familiar with all of them. I don't really feel compelled to pick one because I feel like I could finish all 4 of them with a single roundhouse kick to the head.
Yeah. Yeah. One big roundhouse kick to that giant noggin would just take him down.
Yeah, just.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
As far as the second question, there's been so many, like in your jiu-jitsu journey, like you have so many different people that influence and mentor and help you out and make a difference. And it's really hard to weigh one against another, but the one that I wanted to mention, just because it was sort of a unique role and time for me, was my buddy Josh, who was a training partner. Shout out Josh. And he and I, when all the gyms were shut down during COVID, we were living in Seattle, we used to meet up 2-3 times a week at Green Lake Park in Seattle and stake out a tarp with little tennis balls over the stakes.
Yeah,
We'd like find a nice softer area, make sure there was no like sticks or rocks or dog poo. Stake out a tarp and then just like work on a couple things and then just roll until we were both
That's
like
very
exhausted.
funny.
And it was so funny because it was like, out people are doing different stuff and you're supposed to be like socially distancing and people are like doing yoga and masks.
Was he a higher belt than you?
He
Like, would you identify him as a mentor?
he was definitely better than me. But we were both blue belts.
Okay.
He probably should have had a purple belt, but never trained in a gi.
Okay.
And he's a real tall, lanky guy, and was an expert in kimuras from like every.
Okay.
It was literally like fighting an octopus, like just his limbs. He was kind of
very
lanky
funny.
and flexible, and so his limbs would just. You'd think like, oh, I've got him pinned, and then all of a sudden there's like an arm sneaking around, locking up at kimura, and then.
It's kind of
so-
funny how those kind of things, they have an impact on you as a martial artist. Because the COVID thing was really a unique time to be a martial artist, especially someone who's into jiu-jitsu, right? Because
Yeah.
some of these other academies for different types of arts, they would just go to Zoom, right? If it was karate, okay, you're just doing this in your living room.
just do
You
kata.
do this Zoom call.
Yeah, it's like doing a yoga class over Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, it's not that much different, but jiu-jitsu, like the academy I was with at the time, we had to black our windows out. And I think I told this in the podcast already, but, they were threatened with fines from the city because they knew that we were still training.
Yeah.
So we had to kind of like play this weird game.
Wait,
We
what's
showed
the
up.
statute of limitation on violating code
That's a
restrictions?
good question, dude. Who freaking knows? But
I'm just joking.
yeah, it was kind of a goofy thing. But all those guys, I felt like I still have this bond with them because it was such a
Oh,
unique
yeah.
time to train, and so I still drop into that academy, probably once a month, I would
Yeah.
say. So
Well, and I started training at the gym that we're at now
yeah,
later in that
okay.
same kind of time. So
Gotcha. To answer that question, and I always feel like this is it's odd that I always answer the question with Gary Drake at Raider Tactical, but the reason why is because he was the first person, and this was in the police academy when he was an instructor, that he gave me my introduction into holistic combatives, right? Like, and so in law enforcement, you'll hear these people talk about the fact that the training is very siloed, right? Like there's firearms guys and there's DT guys, and they never talk to each other, and there's no cross training happening. So their programs are like they're not very comprehensive. But when he was in the academy, we're doing stuff with cert guns, which are like it's a firearm that's weighted. It's weighted like a firearm, but it just has a little laser that cracks off when you pull the trigger, and he was running us through stuff, utilizing cert guns that involved grappling and all that sort of thing. And so for me, it made an impression that, oh, okay, all this stuff should be and can be trained together versus siloing it out and only training things in a vacuum. He was just a really, really cool instructor. I was in the academy. I was like a 21-year-old kid, so I looked at this guy like, oh, this guy is the most badass dude ever. And yeah, it just made a big impression on me when I was coming up, and I think that the reason that I like doing seminars and doing the other combative stuff, like we were talking about, right? I just really enjoy going to do seminars and exploring other other arts and other training modalities and that sort of thing. And I really do attribute that to the experience I had in the police academy under Gary Drake.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool.
And so moving on to our main topic, which it looks like I did not actually write down in my notebook, but it's going to be covering kids and martial arts. And so we had a couple of questions that we kicked back and forth, and I just took some bullet points. I think it's more fun to kind of listen to the other, like listen to your take, and then we kind of just like play off of that versus me coming in here with a bunch of canned reasons and reading it off my notebook. But so what question did you want to start with?
Yeah, well, let's just start with what is the benefit of martial arts for kids, and specifically with jiu-jitsu, why is it better for kids than other martial arts? I'm sort of assuming
Yeah.
the answer there, but
Sure. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead and play off that.
yeah, well, I think obviously, so in case you don't know, I teach kids classes twice a week. As I mentioned, I've just started to do private lessons, and it's funny, a lot of times people catch me on the end of a kids class and they're like, man, good on you for doing that. And it's like, honestly, I love it, and I really don't find it that taxing compared to like I as a profession, I'm a teacher, and dealing with kids in a classroom context is a huge, like, can be very, very, very difficult compared to in a sport martial arts context.
I find it very taxing.
Running a kids
I
class?
do, dude. I find it pretty
Interesting.
Emotionally taxing for sure.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, maybe I have enough experience where I kind of have it in a rhythm. And
Yep.
but anyways, so I'm obviously a big believer in martial arts and specifically jiu-jitsu for kids. I think it kind of can provide a little bit of different things depending on the need of the kid. But let's start with the self-defense kind of confidence
Sure.
aspect of it. As we've talked about, like, a lot of adults are not, and you feel this when some people come in the gym and maybe they haven't done contact sports and they're really uncomfortable with,
They're apprehensive.
yeah, just, you're like, you try to show them a clinch position and you can just feel their body is like so uncomfortable
Yeah.
and like stiffening up. And so I think just getting that exposure for kids, learning to use your body in different ways. And also the beauty of jiu-jitsu is learning how to be. I was just talking to a student earlier today I had a private with, and I said, part of jiu-jitsu is sometimes you're controlling the other person, sometimes they're controlling you. So you gotta have to learn how to be strong in good positions, and you have to learn how to survive and keep yourself safe in bad positions. And I think that's just good for kids to just have to deal with that discomfort and work out of that, and then also have some power over another human being and not abuse it.
Yep.
And so there's like the two sides of that coin. But I think a lot of kids these days, it's like it's almost like we're conditioning them to be manipulative and to try to use their words to make everything the way they want it to be. And that's what I love about jiu-jitsu is, like, there's a problem, like, you're uncomfortable, there's a problem, and you have to find your way out of it. And if you can't, you can always tap. So it's like, it's never going to be that overwhelming. But I think that aspect of it is one thing that benefits a lot of kids.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I also think it can be something that's appealing to kids that aren't attracted to more traditional team sports, right? Like we've talked about in the past, that jiu-jitsu brings in a very specific type of person, and I think that is kind of included with kids, right? Kids that do martial arts and maybe not other sports, there's a certain type of personality there that maybe they don't find as much success in a team setting as they do when something is singularly focused and they're kind of able to be in their own space and doing things independently. I think the big thing for me, and this is a very basic, simplistic answer, but as our culture becomes more and more sedentary and kids are playing more things like Roblox and Minecraft and they're not spending as much time outside, I think that the statistics really back that up. Jiu-Jitsu allows movements of the body that even more traditional sports aren't going to they're not going to promote, right? With certain things like flexibility and the proprioception that comes along with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
If I can add to that,
go ahead.
I think one unique thing about Jiu-Jitsu is you, especially for the bottom position, you need to learn how to engage all four limbs at once.
Yeah.
And not like, okay, in basketball you could say, okay, well, I'm doing this with my arm and, I'm dribbling with this arm, I'm doing this with my off arm, I'm moving my legs, but it's just different when it's like, okay, I'm hooking with this foot, I'm posting with this foot, I'm grabbing the wrist with this hand. It's like, it really develops your coordination, almost like playing the drums or something, where it's like all four limbs are developing their own program and are moving independently of each other.
When I was working like residential HVAC or even like being a builder and like framing stuff and general contractor, I did recognize the fact that I had the amount of body awareness I had, like being able to squeeze through tight spaces and feeling comfortable in those places. I would consciously like recognize is like, oh, this is the only reason I'm comfortable in this space right now is because of jiu-jitsu and like being able to move in this confinement and not feeling panicked.
I've noticed that like scrambling, like being out in nature and having to scramble up and down mountains.
Yep.
And it's like, putting yourself in different positions, shifting your weight in different ways. I think that jiu-jitsu like really develops that almost unlike anything.
Yeah, and I think that I think we should. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our goals for kids in martial arts.
Well, can I say one more thing?
Yes, of course.
From the self-defense perspective too, I think like teaching kids striking arts at a young age is not great for two reasons. One is it's just not effective. We don't want our kids to be in fights anyway. So, you take all this with a grain of salt. But no, seriously. Yeah. But you do want them to be able to protect themselves against a bully or something. And the reality is, like, punches and kicks at a certain age, they're very upsetting. And, kids obviously, like, their emotional threshold can be much lower, and, like, getting in a fight could be really, really upsetting to a 6 or 7 or 8 year old. But the reality is, kids that age are not going to be knocking each other out with punches and kicks and stuff. It's and the other thing is just the optics. Yeah. From the optics point of view, I think like parents and especially moms, may get really worried about kids getting into fights, and also like even if your kid was in the right, if like he punched the other kid in the face, it just could look bad, and he might be the one who gets it. But if he just like tackled the kid and mounted him and just pinned his wrist to his chest, it's probably a better look. Sure,
that's for sure. I would agree with that.
And also, I just think it can be learned way more quickly. Yeah, because just knowing what the mount position is and having just some practice, being on top and having people trying to bump you off, or just a little bit of practice could go such a long way and put a kid in a position to protect themselves.
Yeah, especially against other kids. That's certainly the case.
And lastly, I would just say grappling, I just think comes way more natural to them,
Yeah.
and it's a normal way of kids playing with each other and also with adults, whereas like striking, it feels like a fight.
Yeah, and the modality for training striking, if you're going to become an effective striker, it's going to take things like sparring. And I don't think that it is particularly beneficial or something that we would want to promote is kids sparring with one another, even though they're not going to be able to do the same type of damage as a grown adult when it comes to sparring. I still think...
But it's the cumulative
exactly,
damage that's really bad.
They're even finding in things like soccer from kids heading the ball.
Yeah.
Like that is beginning to... that can contribute to CTE.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that jiu-jitsu, for all those reasons that you just listed, seems to be like the art that I would be... It's the reason I have my kids doing it, versus other arts. I think that it's the most... It just makes the most sense. With that said, what do you think, you're a pretty much a full-time instructor for kids classes, and you do these privates. How do you think... what do you think your goals should be as someone who's coaching kids? And I guess that's kind of relative to how it differs from, your what you're trying to push adults towards.
Yeah. Well, I would say with either kids or adults, everybody's going to kind of have different goals. And I think it's one of the things you were pointing out about kids that might not be into team sports, or the difference, and I think team sports are great, and it's good to learn teamwork in that sense, and to have a common goal. And sometimes kids who aren't as good need to learn their role in the team, and there's probably some character, and and the kids who are better maybe need to learn how to lead the others and not just be the cocky star on the team or whatever. But I just think there's less pressure on kids because it's sort of up to them to get out of it what they want. So for some of them, it's just a fun activity they do twice a week. I also have a lot of kids that compete multiple times a year, and maybe we'll talk about kids in competition a little bit later. But they have their own goals. And then we've also known a couple kids who are good enough to possibly make a career in in jiu-jitsu.
I was talking about that on Greg's
or
podcast,
MMA.
talking about Rad and Murphy. Dude.
Yeah, or shout out to I think Dylan kind of left the gym right on the tail end of you. But a lot of the guys sort of saw him, sort of like Murphy now, sort of saw him like grow from like a skinny kid who was skilled to like.
Now he's giving adults real problems on the mats.
Yeah.
I love that.
So anyway, I think everybody's goals are kind of different, and so that can be somewhat difficult to manage as a coach. But it's also, you just want to create an environment where everybody's motivated to get better and to help each other. And so, honestly, a lot of it happens without anything that I'm consciously doing. You know what I mean? It's just, as a coach, you're just really trying to maintain the proper environment and just adjust kids when they get off course. But yeah, I would say, everybody in general wants to get better, and I'm trying to encourage that and figure out what is the best way. But people have different ceilings and different levels of engagement, so it's a difficult question to answer.
Sure. What I have found over the course of my kids entering sports now and seeing them train jiu-jitsu, and the times that I have helped out with kids class and that sort of thing, is that all these activities, these different sports or extracurriculars, it's like this vessel to kind of inject other things like you're mentoring these kids and you're trying to teach virtues, and there's other things beyond just the activity, right? When it came to, like, my son's playing t-ball now, and dude, t-ball kids at that age, it is controlled chaos, and controlled is being very generous. It's a very it's very difficult to get kids like that to be very focused when it comes to trying to learn new skills. And so the skill building when it comes to, hey, we're trying to make these kids good at baseball, is almost secondary or maybe even tertiary to, like, no, we're actually trying to teach these kids how to conduct themselves in a team atmosphere, and how to push their boundaries so where they understand the rules of the game and things like that. And then, like you said, like, every kid's a little bit different. So, there's certain kids at our academy where it's like, the goal should be to really try to improve this kid's jiu-jitsu, because he could certainly do something with it, and he's clearly passionate enough about this art that maybe in 10 years I want to show him as much as I can, or I want to help him as much as I can with the art itself, so that he has that opportunity, or that option once he gets older, to do with it whatever he chooses to do with it. And there's other kids where it's like, man, this kid's home life isn't that great. You get that sense, and so you kind of take those moments. I'm like, okay, jiu-jitsu, yeah, this kid, it's good to learn jiu-jitsu, but honestly, this is just a good time for him to interact with a respectable male figure, right? And kind of to share, hey, we're here for you, and we are here to look out for your best interest, and set a good, be a good role model for kids like that. So, like you said, it's kind of
teach you the right and wrong way to act.
Yeah, totally. I think that's a very, like you said, it can be kind of you could go a lot of different directions with that question. But again, the more that I see my own children entering into sports and doing extracurricular activities, I'm starting to realize that the activity itself, they're at the age now where that is really just a medium for teaching them other social skills.
Yeah.
And again, I think that jiu-jitsu, it is a fertile ground for that kind of thing, right? There's fertile ground to teach things on humility and, being tough. And my son, my son's a sensitive kid, and there's been a couple times at jiu-jitsu where he's cried, and he's either sought me out, and Coach Chris has, like, taken him aside. He's like, okay, hey, go ahead and breathe. And I say that to point out, like, yesterday, he's getting sick like I am right now, and we went to go do picture day for T-ball. And he's in the car, like, my stomach hurts, and he's crying. And I was like, okay, well, like, what can I do? And he said, he's 5 years old, and he goes, I just need a second. And then he just starts breathing.
Yeah. That's
like,
amazing.
doing that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I take a knee in front of him, and I start doing the breathing with him. And then he's like, okay, I'm okay. And then he moved on, and then he started acting up again. And he was like, my stomach hurts. And so before we got over to the group, he did it again. Went over there, totally troopered through it. Took his pictures, and
he's 5?
He's 5,
Yeah.
and so I'm holding his hand, walking back to the car, and he's in much, like, higher spirits at that time, and I'm just trying to tell him, I was like, dude, I am so proud of you. I could have cared less if you were to do these pictures and stuff, and I don't care that you cried. What I'm impressed by, and I think this is, like, a poignant thing to be hearing from your father, right? Sometimes it's easy to forget that when you have kids, that it's really it can be a strong moment, whether that they'll probably remember in the future. But I was just telling him, like, you were so tough, like, and I think that, and you foster that virtue, and I think that moment was really facilitated by experiences he had in jiu-jitsu, where it came to overcoming his nerves and knowing that, okay, I can get through this. So yeah, like we were saying, I think that the art and the environment is just it's just a medium for teaching greater life skills, and I think that's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and that is sort of a unifying lesson that you're trying to teach to all those kids that are in your class, regardless of sort of their skill level or their level of ambition within the sport. And it's like you were saying, you might have somebody who could be really, really, really good, but if they're an a-hole, then I would kind of feel like a failure as a coach if like they go on to win ADCC, but then they're I don't know, just like insulting people on social media or whatever it is.
You want them to show a sense of character, right?
Yeah, and represent the spirit of jiu-jitsu, which is about, I have this line as a coach. Sometimes I'll say, remember everybody, you can't control another person until you can control
yourself.
Right.
Have you seen the Mystery Men? Where he's like,
yes.
He just says this stuff one
the
way,
Sphinx,
and then then says it backwards the other way. He's like, if you cannot learn to control your rage, or if you cannot learn to master your rage, and then
your rage will control you.
Your rage will become your master. And the guy's like, that's what you were gonna say, right? Yeah, just very funny. But no, it's very true.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple other things. I sort of actually wrote a list of like character traits that I think jiu-jitsu helps develop. You kind of listed most of them, but I would just add humility and mercy also. Just like I was talking about before, is you need to learn humility because you're going to take those whoopings.
Yep.
And then you also need to learn mercy when you're on the other side of that. You don't abuse that power. And, sometimes I remind those kids, like, these techniques I'm teaching are very, very dangerous. And so you have to show me that I can trust you with this knowledge, that you can be safe with it, that you know when to...
Yeah. You're like a grandmaster.
To back off. That's sort of
you want to learn a dim mock.
That's the aura that I'm trying to...
Yeah.
I will say one thing about coaching kids is it definitely can be like a boost to your ego.
Oh, yeah?
They'll start to see you as like... I remember I like to get in a workout in the gym before they all start showing up. And I remember one time I was kicking the bag, and one of the kids came in the gym. He like peeked around the corner, and he saw me kicking the bag, and I'm like, I have decent kicking technique,
sure,
but I'm not like a world beater.
Yeah.
And then he was like, he's like, I heard him whisper to another kid. He's like, Coach Cody was just kicking the bag, and it was like sounded like a gunshot.
I thought it was gonna break off the chain, dude. You should have seen it.
Yeah, I kicked pretty hard.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of well. That just goes to speak more towards you're a role model for these kids, and I really do think, because when you're a kid and you're looking up to adults, right? Everyone kind of has someone they can picture in their brain that was like, man, I just thought that guy was the man growing up. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, they're just like a normal human being. And then all of a sudden you're in the position of being the man for some of these kids. And you still I feel very similar to the way I did when I was a 16-year-old kid. I'm still figuring stuff out, but that's just a little bit more incentive to carry yourself in a good way, and remember that, dude, there's kids that are watching you, and they're going to take certain characteristics from you, and you should mind your P's and Q's with that in mind.
Yeah, everything you say makes a difference.
Makes a difference, yeah, truly.
So I'd like to move on to sort of the nitty-gritty about how to run a kid's class.
Yes.
And obviously I have a lot of ideas about this, but I certainly don't have like the be-all end-all answer. And I would say, so there's sort of two questions, is the form, so what is sort of the structure of your class, and then the content, so what actual techniques are you teaching them? So in terms of the form, typically, we do solo warm-ups. We do usually like showing a move and drilling the move, although I have been moving more towards like positional type games.
An ecological approach, some might say.
Yes.
Right on.
But some combination of those and then rolling.
Okay.
So what do you think should be the balance of those four things in general? I mean, maybe in every class. Sometimes I think every class should not be the same. I think kids benefit from routine, but it's also good for them to mix up the routine.
So I have said this before. I think traditional warm-ups are kind of a waste of class time.
Yes,
Generally
I know.
speaking.
So let's get into it.
Yeah. So, and I say that, and there's guys out, there's instructors on here right now that probably run their classes that way, and there's really no shade to them, right?
Yeah.
That's not what I mean to say. This is clearly a personal thing. But I think that you can get your blood moving just as well going, hey, you're going to do 7 Toriando passes, go. And then switch top and bottom. Or you're going to Toriando pass for the next 45 seconds, go. And then switch top and bottom. Hey, you're going to go switch these positions. You're going to start on this side control, knee on belly, windshield wiper to the other side. You're going to do that for 45 seconds, back and forth, go. Right? I think that those kind of movements are going to be more applicable than teaching both children and adults to do things like, okay, you're going to front roll now, you're going to shrimp now. And, I understand why that stuff is utilized in warm-ups. I just think that, hey, if we only have, say, 1 hour to train, let's do jiu-jitsu to warm our bodies up.
Yeah.
So I actually picked that up from my buddy Greg Anderson. That's how he chooses to run his classes, as well as my buddy Courtney Muse. When he runs his classes, it's never traditional warm-ups. We might do like a quick jog, but it's always, the starting warm-up is always going to be some type of very clearly 2-man jiu-jitsu movement in order to warm the body up. So I think that's the first thing I would say.
Can I give a counterpoint?
Yes.
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think what you're saying is more true for adult classes. However, with kids, I do have kids, like, they struggle to do a forward roll.
Yes.
And maybe for an adult, that's not so important. Maybe doing a proper forward roll is not that useful to jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm trying to think. Like, I guess it's like if you get hip toss, learning to tuck your head,
Sure.
Is maybe the application of it. Which actually could save your life. I mean, let's say you get thrown over the handlebars of a bicycle or a motorcycle, like knowing or having the instinct to tuck your head and roll could save your life. So maybe it's helpful for adults too, but I just think, we were talking about like developing coordination.
Yes.
I think there's an argument. I'm not saying I'm convinced either way, but I think there's an argument that it's good for kids to practice those movements in order to develop coordination and learn to move their body.
I would say I'm more sympathetic towards using that stuff for the reasons you said with kids than adults, for sure.
And let me add too, I just feel to have all my kids doing Toriando pass or something like that, most of them are just going to be doing it horribly.
Probably right.
And maybe I just need to maybe the way to do it would be to just let that happen.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have to think about it.
Yeah, actually, now that you say that with the kids, because my brain went to like, it probably is a beneficial thing to teach a kid how to break fall. And adults, it's probably a good thing to teach them how to break fall,
Yeah.
So there are obviously with those movements, but I just think...
I would say of all solo warm-ups, I think break falls are probably the most important, and most schools don't really do them.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that completely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say as far as warm-ups go, I do. Maybe it's one of those things like, okay, yeah, it's fine to do those maybe once or twice a week. But with that said, I think that there's definitely a space to be like, hey, we're not going to do those for warm-ups today. Instead, we're going to do sprawling. You're just going to you can do it solo, whatever, just dropping your hips down. But I also think that again, there is room for, hey, today's warm-up, instead of doing our normal, roly-poly stuff, we're going to do, like we were saying, like knee on belly transitions or Toriando passing. I say Toriando just because that's an easy metric.
I will say one thing I agree with you is with shrimps.
Yeah.
I think doing a shrimp as a solo drill is actually a pretty complicated movement, especially for little kids.
Yeah.
I've found you're just trying to explain it, you demonstrate it. I'll try to help move their body.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'll pin their foot to the ground and I'll grab the back of their belt and pull on it, and
Sure.
you're trying to make your butt do this. And that can help sometimes. But I just feel like I've put so much time into getting them to shrimp properly.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, shrimping under pressure to recover your guard out of side control is just such a different sensation
Sure.
than shrimping down the mat as a solo drill.
Yeah, I would agree.
I kind of think we should just give up on it. And,
Yeah.
And I've actually seen kids develop that movement so much better from a eco approach,
Yep.
like just creating the game conditions to where they understand, and they start to understand how to recover guard just because they're like.
But again, right, there's a perfect example for like another way to train that. I was like, okay, you're going to start in half guard on the bottom. You're going to shrimp out and retain guard. There's a context there for them to be able to really play that movement off of, so they understand like, oh, this is where this movement takes place. And having that context, right, you could tell a kid to shrimp, trying to escape a position, but depending on what the body positioning is like, they might not they might just do the movement as if they were in a solo drill, but that's never that is never what it looks like when you're doing it in the form of an escape.
Yeah, that's true. So let's say, as far as the drilling question, I would say of those 4 things, the least amount of time should be.
Yes.
Or, I'm sorry, not drilling. The warm up.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah, we can
solo.
we can certainly agree on that point.
So let's say out of a 45-minute class, I would really try not to do much more than 5 minutes.
I would agree.
I've also experimented, by the way, with doing a totally different type of class warm-up where I have them run and shuffle sideways, and then everybody finds a space on the mat, 10 jumping jacks. Really just try to get their heart rate up.
Yep.
And I'm starting to prefer, and some of them are more jiu-jitsu related movements, like we'll get on the ground and do bridges or triangles. It's sort of like if you've ever been to like a traditional Gracie, they have like a traditional Gracie warm up.
Okay.
It's a little more like that.
Gotcha.
And I do kind of like that, and I find they complain about it, which makes me want to do it more.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, well,
We're
that
doing it
means
10 times.
you guys are in bad shape.
Sure.
And I yell at them about it too. I'm like, hey guys, we're here to learn. I'm here to teach you how to protect yourself. If you get tired that easily, you can't protect yourself.
Sure.
Guess what? If you're really, really tired, it doesn't matter how much jiu-jitsu you know.
Yep.
You can't really do anything.
Yeah.
So instead of complaining, you guys got to learn how to pace yourself and concentrate and catch your breath and do your best. But I don't want to hear any more grumbling.
Yep. There you go. I love it, dude. I love it.
So let's move on to solo drilling, or sorry, not solo, partner drilling versus more of a game positional sparring based approach versus rolling. What's your feeling about how you would balance those out?
I think the gamification of drills is going to be far more beneficial than your standard static drilling. And I've seen that when I've helped out with kids class, or, I've only run probably my own kids class 6 or 7 times. But I noticed, like, okay, I'm trying to teach them this arm bar, and these kids are just, like, often like, oh, okay. Because you give them these parameters, hey, go do this thing. And then they lack focus. They're children, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And they don't know how to be good partners also.
That's very true.
Like if coach shows us an arm bar, you and me can practice it, and I can kind of give you the right feel.
Yes.
And I can kind of tell, oh, when you do that, it feels like I could slip out here. And then you're like, oh, and then you tighten that up. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
some energy and also some dialogue.
Yeah. So what I have tended to do when I've run those classes, I noticed that, and I was like, okay, I need to make a game out of this somehow. And sometimes that would look like, okay, we're just going to do some positional sparring and this is your setup. This is where you're at. This is the point at which you reset, And I just seemed, and again, this is all opinion based and it's anecdotal, but when I saw those kids, when it's a game and now there's a little bit of action for both parties, both the person on the bottom and the top, I just felt like their focus like tenfolded. Yeah. And so when I was able to do that, and again, it was literally things like, okay, open guard passing, your feet are on their hips, and this person's trying to pass. You don't want them to pass. Keep your guard retained. If they drop into your guard, they lose. And then you reset. Mm-hmm. If they get past your guard, you lose, and then you guys reset. And so when you put like something on the line like that, and you make here's the rules of the game, now go play. I just found that it seemed to me that kids seemed to enjoy it more than when I was like, hey, we're gonna drill this arm bar for the next 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And that made an impression on me.
Yeah.
When I've run the classes like that.
I have to say, 100% agree. I've been experimenting with this really ever since probably around the time when we did our second podcast on this kind of subject, and I started to hear some of the arguments for this approach. And again, I think for kids it's especially true. I'm still not totally convinced that there's no room for showing moves.
Mm-hmm.
And I will still show some moves to the kids, but I'm doing a lot more of what you're talking about. And you can, as you watch and react, you can start to tweak the parameters based on problems that you're seeing. And it's just so much more effective. And sometimes I'll stop and I'll say, like, I'll give an example. I had a game and it was closed guard. Person on top is just trying to get the legs open and stand up and disengage.
Mm-hmm.
Person on bottom is trying to sweep. And some of the kids are not able to sweep.
Yep.
I've shown some of the moves, but they just can't put it all together. But they do know if the other person can stand and get away, they lose.
Yes.
So now they're learning how to break posture without me showing how to break posture. They know, and they're also like, a lot of the kids, they need to develop the muscles to lock their ankles.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
especially
totally.
a lot of the little kids.
Can I say something
Yeah,
real
go
quick?
ahead.
So a couple weeks ago, you had told me that you were having the kids play like this rhino game when it came to head positioning, and as I showed,
that comes from wrestling.
okay, well,
I didn't make that up.
okay, well, with the seminar that I went to, they did something similar. He was telling me in his gym, but they called it like they have a bunch of shirts that have like unicorns on them, and he was saying the reason we didn't go with rhino is because the point is on the nose. But no, dude, with the unicorn, it's right here, which is where you want to be driving that pressure and stuff.
I actually
thought
like
that was
the
very
name
funny.
Stags better.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty neat.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
antlers.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of funny that you had brought that up and having the kids do that, and then he was telling me that was a training modality that he also used in like
Yeah.
adult classes.
Well, if you don't know what we're talking about, the game is no hands behind the back, and both players touch foreheads, and you sort of imagine you have antlers or a unicorn horn or devil horns, whatever.
Sure.
And if I can stab you, the way I teach it is in the neck or the chest, then I win. And you'll immediately see kids lower their base and straighten their back and be comfortable with head-to-head contact,
Yep.
which a lot of times they're not in the standing position. But as we know, like head fighting is a huge part of jiu-jitsu, standing up and on the ground, actually.
Sure.
And yeah, it's just an example of you create a game, it's fun, it's memorable, and it immediately sort of draws out the kind of movements that you're trying to teach.
Yep. Yeah, it's kind of funny that it draws that stuff out, even though that was completely, it was unspoken as part of the game. It was just a natural, they recognized that it was just more advantageous to grab that low base when it came to trying to accomplish the objective, which is to bury their horns into the neck or chest of the other person. So I found that to be very, very cool. So yeah, I think that it sounds like we're pretty much in agreement with how to run the drilling versus the positional sparring stuff.
So what I've been doing is I'll just sort of weight it. This is my working theory, is that sort of spend 2 weeks on a position and try to teach a little of the top and the bottom. And as those 2 weeks progress, then we're moving more from showing moves to doing more of a game approach.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll go back and forth because I think sometimes the game helps them to see the problem.
Yep.
To see, like, if I just say, okay, knock this, you're in closed guard, knock this person over, get on top. A lot of them are just like, well, how do I do that?
Sure.
And so now they're more interested to listen when you show a hip bump sweep or whatever. But I have found that in general, if it's like, okay, today we learned a scissor sweep. You grip here, you grip here. You know, I try to keep it like real tight.
Yep.
But then you're going to have a couple groups of kids that just don't get it. And then it takes a while to show them. It takes like half the round to show them. And then you run to another group to fit. And so meanwhile, they're just sitting there.
Yep.
And they're not doing anything.
Sure.
And the beautiful thing about the game is like, here's the game, go. Now they're all grappling, and now you can go give details.
Yep. Hey, you might want to try doing
one-on-one.
this. Yeah, absolutely.
And sometimes I'll have them circle back up. I'll say, hey, we're going to play again. A lot of you guys are missing this detail. Like I was talking about, when the person stands up in your guard, if their feet are right there, grab their feet, you have the easiest sweep in the world.
Yep.
And so, I don't have to like set it up. Like if I were to teach that move, a lot of them would sort of struggle because sort of both people need to do something. But now it's just like recognizing the opportunity.
Sure.
So I'm still trying to figure out how to balance it out because, like I said, I think you do need to show them moves.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe I'm just not seeing.
But I think the way that
how to make a scissor sweep manifest out of thin air. But actually, I'll say I also, from having the games, I've seen them do things I never would have taught them. The like moves that I don't even do.
Yeah.
Like, I had these two really, really little kids, and the one would stand up in the closed guard, and the other kid would drop his closed guard down to the kid's ankles and tie up his legs. It's called a mermaid sweep. Actually, Leandro Lowe, rest in peace, got a lot of people with this.
Okay.
I don't do it. I'm aware of it. I've seen it. But he's sort of like figured that out on his own. So,
but when it comes to like showing moves and stuff, I think that you kind of spelled that out. Where here's this game, go play, and then you walk around like, hey, this is what you're naturally doing.
Yeah.
You might find a little more success if you choose to add this little detail in, right? So you might be giving different types of instruction to different kids, but you're playing off of whatever their strengths or their tendencies already are. Yeah. So I think that could be certainly be perceived as a strength when it comes to running your program like that.
Yeah. And then what about rolling? Like, what's your feeling about just letting kids roll? Should they spend a lot of time?
I think that it depends on the age of the kids, because I think that free rolling, again, there's not enough parameter there to keep things active. So sometimes you'll see, okay, we're rolling, and then a kid will just be in someone else's closed guard and they're sitting there talking, versus like, okay, here, I'm going to make these games super confined. We are positional sparring. It's not a free roll. Again, kind of like going back to what we were talking about, like the games where get through their guard. Get through their guard and play that and look for the sub off of that. If they get out of your guard, you only have 30 seconds or whatever it is, right? I think that kind of stuff.
So we sort of both agree that the positional games should probably take more time traditionally that's been dedicated to partner drills and to rolling.
I think
and
100%.
I agree. And I mean, kids are always asking to roll. I always have some kids like, when are we going to roll? When are we going to roll? The nice thing about the games is now for the kids that don't know how to roll, they have something to do that's basically like rolling.
Yeah, totally.
You can just say, hey, they're like, I don't know what to do, coach. Just do the same thing we've been doing.
Yeah, right on. Well, we're coming to the tail end of the episode, so do you have something that you wanted to talk about next week? Uh-oh, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, he's not prepared for this question. Oh, okay, here we go.
So I would like to do next episode on strength, conditioning, and recovery.
Perfect. Yeah, I love it. Fantastic. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to the Grappler's Dilemma podcast. This has been episode 8, where we talked about training kids and kids in martial arts. If you want to reach out to us, we have an Instagram. It's going to be the Grappler's Dilemma. Send us a message. I'm on there just about every day checking. And some of you guys are really involved with that as far as sending me messages and commenting on the page and that sort of thing, which I really appreciate. We recently just hit our 110th episode download.
Hey-o.
And our last reel got 1,000 views on it, which is like pretty cool to see that kind of stuff happening. That's literally 4 times the amount of the reel previous to that. So, it's like anything. The more effort and the more time you put into something, you start to see the fruits of that labor.
Well, I just want to say to all you who are listening and interacting, we really love and appreciate you.
Oh,
and
big time.
This has been really fun for Aaron and I as our little plant here is just sprouting.
We're trying to get a flower growing, man. We're trying to get a flower growing. We also have an email that's going to be the Grappler's Dilemma podcast @gmail.com. It doesn't seem like you guys tend to lean towards the email as for contacting us or discussing stuff. But I check that every couple of days. So if you do end up sending us an email, just wait a couple days and I'll certainly get back to you. We are in the midst of, this is going to be our second video podcast, so this is also going to be available on YouTube, as well as the one that drops previous to this one. So if you haven't checked those out, please do so and subscribe to the channel. Again, that's going to be the Grappler's Dilemma on YouTube. And we are going to be starting a secondary YouTube channel that's kind of tangential to the to the podcast, and it's going to be called Dilemma Combatives. And on that channel, we're going to be going over things like our recovery routine, our mobility routines, maybe workouts, technique videos, technique breakdowns, street fight stuff. We're going to be kind of playing with the borders of what that's going to be.
We're also going to track my progress as I learn the ancient art of nunchaku.
We are going to definitely do that. That will be a weekly check-in to keep him accountable to the podcast listeners. But anyway, thank you again, guys. I really can't voice my appreciation enough for the guys that have stuck around and continue to listen to us or shared our episodes with other people. It's very humbling, and I feel very grateful for all of you guys. So as always, stay safe and keep training. God bless you all. Os.